Welcome to the TenNet Indigenous Wisdom Research Center. I am your host, author Ato-ene. In this broadcast series, we explore the profound mysteries within our research. Ethiopian esoteric philosophy and alchemy. Our journey into channeling hidden wisdom begins now.
Welcome to the debate. So imagine you are standing right in front of the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela.
Oh, wow. Yeah, just absolutely incredible structures.
Right? You are looking at these colossal, intricate sanctuaries that are carved straight down into solid volcanic bedrock. And, your first instinct is naturally to ask, where are the blueprints for this?
Right, like what scaffolding did they use? What was the math?
Exactly. What pulleys, what architectural algorithms pulled this off? Because we always just assume that systemic human cleverness, like accumulating data and applying physical leverage, is the sole engine of historical greatness.
Yeah, well, because that assumption makes the world feel manageable, I think. We really want genius to just be a recipe, you know?
Right. Put in the time, apply the logic, get a masterpiece.
Exactly. You put in enough time, and out comes Lalibela.
But, and this is where it gets wild when you step into the esoteric traditions that actually analyze these staggering heights of human achievement, that conventional blueprint theory completely falls apart.
It really does. Whether it's Lalibela or, say, the musical architecture of Saint Yared.
Yeah, or even the dominance of the Axumite Empire. If you are listening to this, you might roll your eyes at what comes next, thinking it sounds like ancient magic. But we ask you to stay with us.
Yeah, keep an open mind here.
Because the source material we are examining today presents a radically different paradigm. It posits that wisdom, or Tbeb as it's known, is not a human skill. It is not natural talent. It is not like a high IQ.
No, not at all.
It is an independent, living entity. It is an autonomous force that exists in the universe. And human greatness is achieved entirely by how we unite with this entity.
And that really brings us to the central tension of our discussion today. Because if wisdom is a living entity, how exactly does a human being unite with it?
Which is a huge question.
Right. It's a monumental division in esoteric thought. On one side, you have this highly collective, systemic approach, which suggests that wisdom must be accessed through structured frameworks of enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, you have a strictly individualistic, experiential path that actively rejects those very frameworks.
And I will be representing that systemic framework, which is known as the House of Taos. This perspective argues that true wisdom is realized collectively.
Right.
It is achieved by integrating into a spiritual lineage, utilizing specific systems of geometric illumination, or engaging in rigorous logical dialectic.
The House of Taos' position is that these systemic, collective guardrails are the exact and, honestly, the only mechanisms that can safely build tangible, lasting societal greatness.
And I will be representing the opposing framework, the House of Atomish.
This perspective argues that true wisdom is a strictly individual, deeply hidden connection.
Hidden being the key word there.
Absolutely. It views the systemic, family-based approaches of Taos as inherently limited, if not outright detrimental. True esoteric unification is a personal, experiential journey that ultimately transcends our mortal existence altogether.
So to truly understand the House of Taos, we really have to look at the mechanism of how this unification happens. The text uses a brilliant, very grounding metaphor of a royal family.
The marriage metaphor, yeah.
Right.
If wisdom is an independent, living entity, you cannot just stumble your way into its presence. You cannot demand it. If you want the privileges of royalty, you can either stand outside the gates and beg for favors, which is frankly what conventional external religion often amounts to.
That's a fair assessment of the text.
Or you can marry into the family. When you marry in, you become part of the bloodline. You adopt the family's DNA. And Taos offers 3 distinct systemic paths to achieve this marriage.
Break those down for us.
Sure. First, there is Uzic, which is the path of spiritual lineage. This isn't just about finding a guru, It is about being literally, spiritually born of the mother of wisdom, creating an unbroken chain, a spiritual family.
Right. Second is Sirad, the path of logic and philosophical inquiry. This is basically the foundation of much of Western civilization, rooted in thinkers like Aristotle and Plato. Sirad uses rigorous dialogue and systemic reasoning as a mechanism to reveal wisdom.
But the issue with the House of Taos, and this is a big issue, is that it confuses the scaffolding with the building itself. Actually, it's worse than that. It confuses a cage for a connection.
A cage? That's a bit harsh, don't you think?
Well, look, the House of Ato-ene presents a much more profound understanding of what this living entity actually is. In the Ato-ene framework, wisdom is described as the eyes of the creator. Think about what that implies. It is the raw perceptual life force that exists with creation, but is strictly separate from it. It cannot be bound by human logic or some philosophical dialectic.
But how do you access it without those tools? I mean, how do you interact with it?
Through lived experience. True esoteric knowledge, according to this material, manifests across 7 distinct dimensions for the individual. We don't have time to unpack all 7 right now, but let's look at 2 critical ones: identity and system.
Okay, sure.
In Ato-ene, your identity isn't absorbed into some collective royal family. Instead, you refine your unique individual self until it aligns directly with that raw force.
Right, but what about the system dimension?
The system dimension in Ato-ene isn't an external bureaucracy or a school of thought. It is your own personalized internal mechanism for navigating reality based on your specific life experiences.
So it's totally subjective then?
It's individualized. When you try to institutionalize this connection, when you force everyone to use the logic of Sirad, for example, you inevitably dilute the pure individual connection to that cosmic life force. Wisdom does not want a marriage contract with a society. It seeks an intimate, absolute unification with the individual identity.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on the necessity of that institutionalization.
Go for it.
The profound danger of the Ato-ene approach is that it is so highly individualized that it risks becoming completely untethered from reality. We are talking about merging with an incredibly potent independent entity, the literal medicine for death, as the text calls it.
Yes, it does call it that.
So how can an individual safely integrate that magnitude of power without the structured guardrails of a system?
What do you mean by guardrails in this context exactly? Well, I mean that the royal family metaphor in Tao isn't just about exclusivity, it's about capacity. The Uzic lineage provides a shared, tested spiritual foundation so you don't lose your way. The Sirad path provides logical boundaries. Okay, but let me just finish this thought. Logic is a safety rail. It says if A, then B. It prevents a person from losing their mind when they encounter this esoteric depth. If you abandon the systemic family, you were just wandering in the dark, hoping to accidentally catch the eye of the creator.
I see.
How does the Ato-ene path prevent this deeply personal experience from just, devolving into mere delusion?
I come at it from a different way. Delusion is actually what happens when you substitute the collective agreement of a group for the raw, undeniable reality of personal experience.
How so?
Well, you just described logic as a safety rail, but if wisdom is this wild, autonomous, living entity, putting safety rails on it means you aren't actually experiencing wisdom at all. You are experiencing a domesticated, watered-down version of it that the group feels comfortable with.
But without a mediator, without a teacher or a framework, you have no way to verify what you're experiencing. You could just be imagining things.
But the Ato-ene framework explicitly defines esoteric knowledge as something derived strictly from personal life experience. It is not something you can read in a text handed down by Aristotle.
Right, but
When you rely on the Taos framework, you are essentially relying on secondhand wisdom. You are trusting the lineage of Uzic or the syllogisms of Sirad to mediate your connection to the entity. But the eyes of the creator do not need a mediator.
I think they do if you want to apply it to anything useful.
Actually, the material points out that because the Ato-ene path is based on the individual's unique life experience, it is deeply hidden. Other people won't understand it. It will look confusing, perhaps even chaotic from the outside, precisely because it hasn't been homogenized for a group. The Taos guardrails you value so highly are exactly what prevent the individual from experiencing the true, terrifying, and awe-inspiring magnitude of this force.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently when we look at the historical evidence the material provides. Let's move from the abstract into the concrete for a second.
Sure.
Let's talk about the tangible heights of human civilization we opened with. Let's look at the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, or the dominance of the Axumite Empire. These are achievements that required massive collective orchestration.
They required mass coordination, yes. I'll give you that.
And the Taos framework perfectly explains this through its third path, which I actually haven't fully unpacked yet, Tmol.
Ah, the path of illumination.
Right. Tmol is the path of illumination, and it is entirely systemic. The practitioners of Tmol didn't just have a private hidden feeling of wisdom. They used precise geometry and astronomical alignments as literal vessels.
Okay, but
Wait, we have to explain how this works. Think of a room built with perfect acoustic geometry, right? It captures and amplifies sound. Tmol posits that specific angles, math, and stellar alignments act as physical resonators to pull down and channel the light of wisdom into the material world.
a systemic application of light.
Exactly. It was a systemic application. The builders of Lalibela operated on this framework. Similarly, the Sirad framework explains the vast success of Western civilization through its educational systems, its mathematics, and its philosophical debates.
So you're saying Taos builds the world?
The House of Taos provides a demonstrably effective blueprint for organizing society to capture Tebeb. Admesh, being so fiercely individualistic and hidden, seems to lack any credible mechanism to explain how an entire civilization, like Axum, rises together.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You are giving the Taos blueprint all the credit for Lalibela, and I think that's completely backward.
Backward? How?
The Taos schools look at a masterpiece like Lalibela, and they mistakenly claim ownership over it because they recognize the geometry. They say, look, there are astronomical alignments here, therefore it was our specific magic, our specific geometric blueprint that built this. They confuse the symptom for the cause.
How is geometry a symptom? It's the literal structure of the building. You can measure it.
Because the Admesh view completely deconstructs the assumption that the math created the magic. The builders of those magnificent structures achieved those heights not because they were following a Tmol architectural playbook, but because they individually possessed wisdom as a raw living force within them.
Okay.
This brings in another of the 7 Admesh dimensions blessing. In this context, blessing isn't some polite prayer. It is the raw, kinetic transfer of living power. The text uses a brilliant, visceral example to illustrate this: the stone David used to strike Goliath.
Right. The material mentions the stone specifically as a vessel of wisdom.
Exactly. Now, a Taj practitioner would look at David defeating Goliath, and they would analyze the trajectory, the physics, the logical arc of the throw. They would say, here is the blueprint for giant slaying. Just throw it at this angle.
Well, physics does matter.
But Admesh says wisdom was the hidden force inside the stone itself. That raw, individual kinetic power is what shatters the giant. The geometry of Lalibela didn't summon wisdom. Wisdom infused the builders, allowing them to manipulate stone in ways that defy logic. And the beautiful geometry was just the natural byproduct of that raw power flowing through them.
Wait. So if Admesh is purely an internal, hidden connection, how do you explain an entire civilization? Are you saying 1,000 stonemasons just happen to have the same internal vibe and accidentally carved a perfect astronomically aligned church?
Not an accidental vibe, a shared raw force. When a civilization rises, according to Admesh, it is because a critical mass of individuals have cultivated this hidden connection. It bubbles up from the individual level.
I see.
It is not because a bureaucracy of philosophers or geometricians mandated it from the top down.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because you cannot separate the achievement from the medium. The geometry of Lalibela, the logical syllogisms of Sirad, these are not just post hoc analyses of greatness, nor are they just symptoms.
I think they are.
No, they are the languages of wisdom itself. Wisdom is clearly meant to interact with the material world in a highly organized way. The text explicitly says that through wisdom, kings rule, writers write, and philosophers debate.
It does say that, yes.
Which points directly to the idea that the ultimate destination of Tibeb is earthly greatness. It is meant to elevate the mortal world. It is meant to establish justice, beauty, and truth here and now.
The Taos systems, whether it's the spiritual lineage of Uzic or the rigorous educational models of Sirad, are designed entirely around this premise. We are meant to bring the light down to illuminate the society we live in. By insisting that wisdom is this hidden, internalized secret, Admesh seems to abandon the responsibility of elevating humanity as a whole. You're keeping the light under a bushel, basically.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the most radical and arguably the most profound concept the Admesh text introduces regarding our ultimate destination?
Which is?
You are looking at earthly greatness, kings ruling, empires rising, magnificent churches being carved as the finish line. Admesh reveals that this entire mortal existence, including all our magnificent civilizations, is merely a gestation phase.
A gestation phase? Like a womb?
Yes. True unification with wisdom does not happen while we are building empires. It happens after death.
So, to put it plainly, you're saying all of human history, all of our greatest architectural and philosophical achievements are just a waiting room for the afterlife.
Not just a waiting room, an incubator. The material uses a striking analogy that forces us to reframe everything. It compares the human experience of cultivating wisdom to the life of Jesus before the crucifixion versus the resurrected Christ.
Okay, unpack that for us.
So, during mortal life, Jesus walked the earth, teaching and performing miracles. But his ultimate, true form, the resurrected Christ, was not realized until after death. Admesh says our relationship with wisdom is exactly the same.
Interesting.
During life, the individual is simply growing their identity, keeping the true nature of their esoteric connection hidden, incubating it. The earthly achievements you praise so highly in the Taos framework, the ruling kings, the grand monuments, they are just the byproduct of this internal growth. They are not the goal.
Then what is the goal?
The goal is to cultivate an identity so completely unified with the eyes of the Creator that when the mortal body falls away, the individual steps into an ultimate post-mortal union.
The post-mortal unification.
Exactly. When you understand that, the Tao's obsession with building stone monuments and winning philosophical debates seems almost tragically short-sighted. You are focused on decorating the womb, while Admesh is preparing for the birth.
Okay, decorating the womb is a vivid way to put it, I'll admit. But I completely reject the premise that the temple and the eternal are in opposition.
How are they not?
The House of Taos does not deny the eternal nature of wisdom. In fact, because wisdom is an independent entity, its eternal nature is a given. But Taos argues that the eternal must be made manifest in the temporal to be fully realized. You call it decorating the womb, I call it aligning the material universe with the divine order.
But why does the divine order need a stone church or a syllogism?
Because we are material beings. When the Tmol practitioners perfectly aligned a structure with the stars, they weren't just showing off their math skills, right? They were creating a physical resonance between earth and heaven. They were anchoring the divine into the dirt. When the Sirad philosophers established a flawless logical truth, they were anchoring the eternal mind into human consciousness. The collective systems of Taoists ensure that wisdom isn't just a private escape hatch for a few enlightened individuals to use after they die. It becomes a transformative, structural power that redeems the human condition right now.
But by focusing so heavily on redeeming the human condition through systems, you inevitably compromise the purity of the connection. Think about how institutions actually function in the real world.
They organize us. They give us structure.
They do, but the moment you turn philosophical inquiry into a rigid school of thought, as Sirad does, you start caring more about the rules of the debate than the revelation itself.
Well,
And the moment you rely on the spiritual lineage of Uzic, you start caring more about who your master was than what you actually experience. Wisdom operates outside of these predictable mechanical constraints. It has its own volition.
But without form, it's just chaos.
It's not chaos, it's untamed. When you try to bind it to a systemic lineage or some mathematical formula, you are trying to domesticate something that is fundamentally wild and transcendent. The Admish path requires the individual to walk alone, precisely because the moment you bring a crowd, you have to compromise the truth to keep the crowd together.
Well, let's draw our positions together here as we are looking at the exact same esoteric source text, but extrapolating two vastly different architectures of human purpose.
Definitely.
From the perspective of the House of Taos, the material provides a demonstrable historical blueprint for greatness. It argues that wisdom as an independent entity demands a vessel large enough to hold it in the material world. That vessel cannot be a single person wandering alone. It must be the structured, collective endeavor of human society.
Right. The systemic view.
Yes. When humanity collectively aligns with the spiritual lineage of Uzic, the geometric resonance of Tmol, or the logical rigor of Sirad, entire civilizations are elevated. It is the only framework that adequately explains the sustained generational brilliance of phenomena like Axum, or the philosophical bedrock of the modern world.
And from the perspective of the House of Admash, this material reveals a much deeper, unmediated truth. Wisdom is not an architectural plan. It is not a syllabus you can memorize.
No, it's not.
It is the eyes of the Creator, an intimate, individual connection that exists entirely apart from the artificial systems we build to comfort ourselves. The true esoteric journey relies on dimensions like personal identity and raw blessing. It is internal, and it's hidden. The empires and monuments are merely echo sparks flying off the anvil of this raw individual power. Adamish teaches us that our true destination transcends this temporary incubator, finding its absolute completion only beyond mortal life, where the hidden identity finally unifies with the eternal.
What we undeniably converge on, however, is the foundational premise of the source material, a premise that really shatters our modern complacency. Despite our profound disagreement on the mechanism, we both agree that the text definitively proves wisdom is not just a synonym for being clever.
Not at all. Absolutely. It is a profound, independent, living entity. It is the ultimate source of human glory, possessing a reality and gravity that exists prior to and independently of any human action. Both Taos and Admish recognize that without this living force, humanity is really nothing more than biological machinery.
And that is exactly why these differing esoteric frameworks challenge us so deeply. If greatness is not just a matter of grinding out hard work, but of literal unification with an autonomous cosmic force, it forces us to reevaluate every monument, every philosophical breakthrough, and every moment of genius in human history.
It really does.
How much of what we call human triumph was actually just humanity providing a vessel for something else entirely?
And there is just so much more to uncover in this material, particularly regarding the remaining dimensions of Admish and how this raw force interacts with the physical world without ever being captured by it. We've really only just scratched the surface of what it means to look through the eyes of the Creator.
We certainly have. We leave you to decide which path to this profound entity resonates most deeply with you. The next time you stand before an impossible monument or listen to a transcendent piece of music, ask yourself, are you looking at the triumph of a perfectly executed systemic blueprint? Or are you witnessing the quiet, devastating power of a single stone thrown with the hidden, untamed force of the universe inside it?